Human waited with an alien girl until the sky cleared. Her dawn smile became his quiet anchor. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Jack Matthews had never imagined that his journey on this remote planet would change his life so dramatically. The wind howled around him, kicking up dust and sand as he pulled his cloak tighter around his shoulders. The storm raged above, dark clouds swirling in chaotic patterns, blocking out any light from the distant sun. His mission was simple: investigate the geological anomalies on this desolate world. But, as fate would have it, the storm had grounded his shuttle, leaving him stranded in the middle of an unfamiliar landscape with only the barest of supplies. As he trudged through the increasingly heavy sand, Jack noticed something, or rather, someone, moving in the distance. It was a figure silhouetted against the swirling tempest, barely visible through the haze. Jack's heart quickened. Despite the storm, he moved forward, his boots sinking slightly with each step. He called out, but his voice was lost to the wind. As he neared, he saw her clearly, a tall, slender figure with skin that glowed faintly in the dim light. Her eyes, a deep violet, caught his gaze as she stood still, waiting. She was alien, there was no mistaking that. Her presence was serene, almost otherworldly, despite the raging storm around them. "Are you all right?" Jack asked, his voice steady but tinged with concern. The alien girl looked at him with a calmness that made his pulse quicken. "I am fine," she replied, her voice melodic, as if every word was carefully chosen. There was a strange intensity in her gaze, as though she could see right through him. "But you should not be out here alone." Jack nodded, glancing at the sky. "I'm stuck," he said simply. "The storm's too strong to get back to my shuttle." The alien girl studied him for a moment, then offered a faint smile. "You will be safe with me." Jack didn't know why, but something in her voice made him believe her. He had no choice but to follow her, hoping that this strange, alien figure might be his only chance of surviving the storm. She led him to a shelter, a small cave hidden among the jagged rocks, where they would be out of the wind and cold. For hours, they sat in silence, the storm howling just outside the cave. Jack couldn't help but watch her. Her quiet presence was unlike anything he had ever encountered. She was not afraid. In fact, she seemed at peace, as though the storm was nothing more than a passing inconvenience. As dawn approached, the winds finally died down, and the first light of the day began to break through the clouds. Jack turned to her, and there it was, her smile. A simple, quiet smile that lit up the darkness around them. It was then that Jack realized that, in that moment, her smile had become his anchor. It was the only thing that made him feel like everything would be okay. He had been stranded, alone in a foreign world, but now he felt a sense of calm he hadn't known in years. For the first time since he'd crashed on this planet, he felt hope. Her smile, warm and full of something he couldn't name, grounded him, giving him a quiet sense of belonging. And as the storm cleared and the sky above began to brighten, Jack knew that this encounter, this alien girl and her smile, would forever be a part of him. The morning light slowly filtered through the cracks in the rocky cave, casting a soft, golden glow over the figures inside. Jack Matthews sat against the cold stone wall, his eyes fixed on the alien girl sitting across from him. Her violet eyes were calm, and her faint smile from the previous night still lingered in his mind, like a quiet echo in the back of his thoughts. As the storm had cleared and the sky had begun to brighten, he felt the weight of the world lifting, as if the very atmosphere had shifted. The tension from the past few days seemed to vanish, replaced by a peaceful silence that only deepened the connection between him and the alien girl. He had spent hours looking at the stars the night before, wondering if he would ever make it back to Earth. But in this moment, he realized something. The uncertainty of survival no longer mattered as much as the moment itself. "Are you always this calm?" Jack asked, his voice softer than usual. The alien girl turned her head, her silver hair catching the light as she did. "Calmness is a trait my people value," she replied, her voice steady and melodic. "The storms come and go, There is no need to panic. Jack nodded, absorbing her words. It was strange to hear such wisdom coming from someone so different, so foreign to him. He had never encountered anyone who viewed the world so serenely. His mind wandered back to the storm. It had been a terrifying experience, but now, in the light of day, everything seemed different. "Do you miss your home?" he asked, his curiosity finally breaking through his usual composure. The alien girl's eyes softened as she gazed at him, a hint of something unspoken passing between them. "Home," she murmured, as if the word itself carried a weight far beyond its simple meaning. "I miss many things, but sometimes one must leave their home to find something greater." Jack looked down at his hands, his mind racing. He understood what she meant, but it was hard to process. He had left Earth for this mission, but that didn't mean he had wanted to leave everything behind. He missed the familiar faces, the places he had known. And yet, here he was, on a strange world, talking to an alien girl who had somehow become the only familiar thing in this new, uncertain life. The silence stretched for a few moments as they both sat there, processing their thoughts. Finally, the girl spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "You are not like the others," she said, her gaze steady on Jack. "Most humans would have panicked in a storm like that. But you did not." "What?" Jack met her gaze, feeling a flicker of something deep within him. "I don't know," he said slowly, not sure how to explain the quiet resolve he had felt in that moment. "Maybe it's because I'm used to things not going as planned. It's easier to just keep moving forward." She studied him for a long moment before speaking again. "Perhaps it is that trait which makes you more than just a human. Perhaps it is what makes you special." Jack blinked, unsure how to respond to such a statement. Special? He wasn't special. He was just a man trying to survive. And yet, in her eyes, he saw something different, a quiet respect, even admiration. It felt strange, but not unwelcome. "I'm no different from anyone else," he muttered, shifting slightly. "But if you say so." The alien girl smiled again, and this time, Jack noticed how her smile seemed to light up the cave, filling it with warmth. It was a smile that didn't ask for anything, a smile that accepted him as he was. And in that moment, Jack Matthews felt as if he had found something he hadn't known he needed. Someone who understood him, even without words. For the first time since he had crashed on this alien world, Jack felt at peace. The quiet, calm smile of the alien girl, Isla, became his anchor in a world that had seemed so strange and uncertain just hours before. The storm had passed, and with it, a new journey was beginning. The morning sun had fully risen by the time Jack and Isla decided to leave the cave. The sky was a brilliant shade of blue, free of the storm clouds that had dominated the night before. A soft breeze swept across the barren landscape, carrying with it the promise of a new day. Jack stood at the entrance of the cave, his gaze fixed on the horizon as he adjusted the straps of his pack. He had never imagined waking up in such a place, let alone sharing the experience with someone so different from him. Isla stepped up beside him, her violet eyes scanning the vast, empty expanse. "Do you always travel like this?" she asked, her voice a calm melody in the quiet morning air. Jack turned to her, his lips curving into a faint smile. "Usually not this far from civilization," he replied, his tone light. "But I make do." Isla nodded, her gaze shifting from the horizon to Jack. "You are different from the others," she said thoughtfully. Jack felt a familiar warmth spread through him at her words, though he wasn't sure how to respond. Instead, he just nodded in return. "Maybe I'm just used to adapting." They both fell silent for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts as the gentle breeze ruffled the air around them. Jack couldn't help but marvel at how easily Isla had adapted to the circumstances. She was so calm, so composed, even in the face of uncertainty. It was something he admired deeply. "We should move before the storm changes its mind," Jack said finally, breaking the silence. Isla didn't argue. She simply gave a small nod and adjusted the strap of her own pack, ready to move forward. Together, they began walking, Jack leading the way. As they made their way across the rocky terrain, Jack couldn't help but notice how Isla's movements were fluid and graceful, despite the harsh environment. Her skin, a soft shade of violet, seemed to glow under the morning sun, and her silvery hair shimmered as it caught the light. She was unlike anyone Jack had ever met. They walked for hours, the landscape gradually changing around them. What had started as barren rocks slowly gave way to patches of sparse, dry grass, and distant mountain ranges loomed in the distance. Every so often, Isla would pause to examine something in the distance. A plant, a formation of rocks, a distant animal. Each time, Jack couldn't help but wonder what was going through her mind. She was an alien, after all. He was beginning to understand that, despite their differences, they shared something more profound than just the desire to survive. There was an unspoken connection between them, something that went beyond the immediate need to escape the storm or find shelter. Jack looked over at Isla as they walked, her eyes focused ahead. It was in moments like these that he found himself drawn to her more than he cared to admit. She wasn't like the others he had met on Earth, or even like the soldiers he had served with in the past. She was something entirely different, something that made him feel both small and powerful at the same time. A few hours later, as the sun began to set and the landscape stretched out before them, Jack finally broke the silence again. "Where are we heading?" he asked, his voice soft but curious. Isla glanced over at him, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "Somewhere safe," she said, her voice steady. "I know this place. It will shelter us from the night." Jack nodded, trusting her judgment. "Lead the way," he said, feeling a strange sense of peace settle over him. As they continued walking, Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of the journey ahead. This was only the beginning. There would be more challenges, more obstacles, but in this moment, he knew that with Isla by his side, he could face anything. The night would come, but so would the morning, and they would be ready. Together, the day had worn on, and the distant mountains were finally within reach. Jack and Isla had been walking for hours, the steady rhythm of their footsteps marking the passage of time. Jack could feel the weariness settling into his bones, but there was something about Isla's presence that kept him going. She moved with a grace that belied the harshness of the landscape, and her quiet determination was a constant source of strength. The sun was beginning to dip behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. Jack could see the first signs of nightfall approaching. "We should find shelter soon," Jack said, glancing at Isla. She nodded, her violet eyes scanning the horizon. "There is a cave ahead," she said, her voice calm, but there was a hint of urgency in it now. Jack felt a sense of relief wash over him. The prospect of a safe place to rest was more than welcome. They quickened their pace, moving toward the cave Isla had pointed out. It wasn't long before they reached it, a small opening in the rocks, barely noticeable unless you knew where to look. Inside, the air was cool and dry, a welcome change from the heat of the day. Jack set down his pack and began unpacking, while Isla moved to a corner of the cave, her eyes distant for a moment. Jack glanced over at her, noticing the way her silvery hair shimmered in the dim light. There was something almost ethereal about her, a quiet strength that made her seem both fragile and unbreakable at the same time. "Thank you," Jack said, his voice soft. Isla looked up, her gaze meeting his. "For what?" she asked, her expression unreadable. "For leading me here," Jack replied. "For keeping me going." Isla tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. "You would have found your way eventually," she said, her voice steady. Jack chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Maybe, but it would have taken longer." He paused for a moment, watching her closely. "I don't know how you do it," he added, his voice tinged with admiration. "How you stay so calm." Isla gave a small smile, the faintest curve of her lips. "It is not always calm inside," she said quietly, "but I have learned to find peace in the quiet moments." Jack nodded, his thoughts drifting. He had never been someone who sought peace, always too caught up in the chaos of life. But here, in this alien world, he was beginning to understand the value of those quiet moments. "You know," Jack said, breaking the silence, "I never imagined I'd find something like this out here. A place, a person, that feels safe." Isla's eyes softened slightly, and she took a step closer to him. "You are not alone here," she said. Jack looked at her, his heart catching in his chest. There was something in her voice, something that made him believe in her words more than anything he had heard before. "Thank you," he whispered. Isla didn't reply right away, but the quiet smile she gave him was enough. It was as if, in that moment, they both understood that the journey they had started together wasn't just about survival. It was about something more, something deeper. As the night fell around them, the cave became their sanctuary, a quiet place to rest, to heal, and to find something they hadn't known they needed: each other. Jack lay back on the soft ground, his eyes closing as exhaustion finally took over. The sounds of the night outside faded away, leaving only the steady rhythm of his breathing and the faint, reassuring presence of Isla beside him. The storm had passed, and with it, the uncertainty that had weighed so heavily on him. For the first time in a long while, Jack felt a sense of peace settle in his chest, a peace that came not from the absence of danger, but from the quiet strength of the person who was with him. The days passed quietly after their first night in the cave, and Jack began to notice the subtle differences in Isla's behavior. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a person with her own thoughts, her own way of understanding the world. As they traveled together, Jack found himself more and more drawn to her, not just for her calm presence, but for her depth. She was unlike anyone he had ever known. They had settled into a routine. Each day, they moved farther across the barren landscape, making their way to a location Isla had in mind. Jack had no real sense of time here. The sun and stars seemed to blend together in a constant cycle of light and dark. Isla was the steady force guiding them forward, always one step ahead, her eyes scanning the horizon with an awareness that seemed to reach beyond the immediate surroundings. But despite her unshakable composure, Jack had begun to notice moments of quiet vulnerability in her. Little things, like the way her hands would tremble when she thought no one was watching, or the brief pause in her voice when she spoke of her past, as though the weight of it was still too much to bear. One evening, as they set up camp in a small valley sheltered from the wind, Jack finally decided to ask her about it. "Isla," he began, his voice soft, "you said once that you had left your home to find something greater. What was it that you were looking for?" Isla didn't answer immediately. Instead, she sat down on a large rock, her gaze lost in the distance, as if trying to find the right words. Jack waited, giving her the space she needed. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't leave my home to find something greater," she said slowly. "I left because I had no choice. My world, it wasn't a place for someone like me. I was different. Too different." Jack frowned, his heart tightening at the hint of sadness in her words. "Different how?" Isla's eyes met his, and for the first time, Jack saw a flicker of pain in them. "I am not like the others of my kind," she said, her voice tinged with sorrow. "I could never fit into their world. I don't belong there." Jack didn't know what to say. He had always felt a sense of not fitting in, too, but his experiences on Earth didn't compare to what Isla must have gone through. He could feel the weight of her words, the years of struggle and heartache she had carried with her. "But you found a place here, haven't you?" Jack asked quietly, hoping his words would offer some comfort. Isla looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the edges of a rock as if lost in thought. "I've found a place with you," she said softly, almost as if she hadn't meant to say it out loud. The words hung in the air between them, and Jack felt a warmth spread through him at the unspoken connection they shared. "Isla," he began, his voice steady, "you don't have to carry that burden alone anymore. You're not alone now." She turned to him, her expression softening as she met his gaze. For a moment, there was no distance between them, no differences, no pasts that had torn them apart. There was only the quiet understanding of two souls finding solace in each other's company. The moment lingered, and in the stillness, Jack knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. As the night fell, the stars above them seemed to shine a little brighter, as if acknowledging the bond that had formed between them. Jack and Isla sat in silence, the only sound the soft whisper of the wind across the valley. It was in these quiet moments that Jack realized just how much he had come to depend on Isla. She was not just his guide through this alien world. She had become his anchor, the one thing that kept him grounded as he navigated the uncertainty of everything around them. The next few days passed in a comfortable, quiet rhythm. Jack and Isla had settled into a routine, moving from one sheltered spot to another, as Isla led the way across the barren, alien landscape. Despite the uncertainty of their situation, Jack felt a sense of peace he hadn't expected. Isla was always calm, always ahead of him, guiding them with a quiet determination that Jack couldn't help but admire. As they walked, they didn't speak much, but their companionship didn't require words. Jack had come to rely on her presence, and Isla seemed to appreciate the silent understanding that had grown between them. It was a connection he had never experienced before, one that transcended the usual need for conversation. The landscape around them was harsh and unrelenting, but there was something soothing about the way Isla moved through it. Her steps were sure, her gaze never wavering from the path ahead. She was in her element here, and Jack couldn't help but feel a little in awe of her. On the fourth day of their journey, they came to a small ridge overlooking a wide, flat plain. The air was still, and for the first time in days, Jack noticed how quiet the world seemed. There were no winds, no sounds of distant creatures, just an overwhelming silence. Isla stopped at the edge of the ridge and turned to Jack, her violet eyes searching his face for something. "We are close now," she said softly. Jack nodded, though he wasn't sure what she meant by that. He had no real sense of direction, relying on her entirely to guide them. "Close to what?" he asked, his voice breaking the stillness of the moment. Isla's lips curved into a small smile. "To the place I told you about," she replied. "The place where I can heal, where I can finally be at peace." Jack's heart skipped a beat at her words. He had seen Isla's strength, her calm demeanor, but he hadn't known that she, too, had something she was searching for. He hadn't known she was carrying that weight inside her, just as he had carried his own burdens for so long. "You haven't told me much about your past," Jack said gently, hoping she would open up to him. Isla glanced down at her hands, her fingers fidgeting with a loose thread from her cloak. She hesitated, then spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I was not always like this," she began. "I come from a place where difference is feared, a place where I was seen as nothing more than an anomaly, something to be controlled." Jack felt a pang of sadness in his chest. He had heard the loneliness in her voice before, but now he understood it more clearly. "I left because I could not stay there any longer," she continued. "I sought something else, something greater, but I never found it. Until now." Jack took a step closer to her, his hand instinctively reaching out. "You found it," he said softly. "You found it in yourself. You don't need to carry the weight of your past anymore." Isla met his gaze, her eyes soft with emotion. She said nothing, but in that moment, Jack could see the walls she had built around herself begin to crack. She was letting him in, just a little. And for the first time since they had met, Jack felt the weight of her journey, not just the physical distance they had traveled, but the emotional distance she had covered in her own heart. The air around them shifted, and Jack knew that this moment would stay with them, that they would remember it when they reached their destination. They had both found something, even if they didn't fully understand it yet. "Let's keep moving," Isla said, her voice steady again, the calm returning. Jack nodded, and they continued on, the horizon ahead of them now filled with the promise of something more. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The landscape had changed again. Where once the flat plains had stretched endlessly, the terrain now rose and fell in gentle hills, with sparse patches of alien vegetation clinging to life in the rocky soil. Jack and Isla had been walking for what felt like days, though Jack wasn't sure how much time had truly passed. Time had become an abstract concept for him, something measured only by the changing light and the rhythm of their footsteps. They had reached the foot of a small mountain range by now, the peaks ahead barely visible through the thin veil of mist that hung in the air. Isla had said they were close, but Jack didn't know to what. He trusted her, but a part of him still couldn't shake the uncertainty. He had lived most of his life making plans, calculating risks, and controlling the outcome of his actions. But with Isla, everything felt different. It wasn't about control or certainty. It was about moving forward, step by step, trusting the path. Jack glanced over at her. She was walking with her usual calm grace, her eyes scanning the landscape ahead as she always did. He wondered if she was still thinking about the past, or if the future had finally started to weigh on her. It had been some time since she had opened up to him, and Jack respected her silence. He knew she wasn't ready to share everything, but he also felt a sense of quiet connection with her. She wasn't just a stranger from another world. She was something else, something important. "We're almost there," Isla said suddenly, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft but steady, and Jack couldn't help but feel a surge of relief. "How much farther?" he asked, his voice reflecting the fatigue he had been feeling for days. "Not far," she replied. "It's just ahead." Jack nodded and pushed forward, his muscles aching from the long journey. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden light over the hills, and Jack could feel the temperature dropping as the evening chill began to settle in. They reached the base of the mountains, and Jack could see a narrow path leading upward, winding through a dense patch of alien trees. "This way," Isla said, gesturing toward the path. Jack followed her without hesitation, though he couldn't help but notice how different everything felt. The air here was thicker, heavier, almost as if the land itself was waiting for something. As they climbed higher, the path grew steeper, and Jack had to focus on keeping his footing. His boots crunched against the loose gravel beneath him, and the sound echoed in the quiet mountain air. The climb was taxing, but Isla seemed unaffected, moving with the same ease she always did. Jack followed her up the narrow path, his breath coming quicker with the exertion. He didn't know what to expect, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this place, wherever it was, held something important, something that could change everything for both of them. After what seemed like an eternity, they reached a flat plateau, a small clearing surrounded by tall, jagged rocks. The view was breathtaking. Below them, the world stretched out in every direction, the vast plains and hills giving way to the distant horizon. And in the center of the clearing, nestled among the rocks, was a small, crystalline structure that glowed faintly in the fading light. Jack stood still for a moment, taking it all in. It was beautiful, but it also felt ancient, as though it had been waiting for them. "This is it," Isla said, her voice almost reverent. Jack could see the emotion in her eyes, the weight of everything that had brought them here. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice low. Isla turned to him, a quiet smile on her lips. "It's a place of healing," she said. "For me. For both of us." Jack's heart skipped a beat. There was so much in her words, so much she was offering, so much he was about to witness. He stepped forward, feeling the pull of the moment, knowing that whatever came next, it would be a turning point. As they approached the structure, Jack could feel the air around them hum with energy, a strange but comforting sensation. Isla reached out and placed her hand on the crystal, her fingers brushing against its smooth surface. The glow intensified, and for a moment, Jack thought he saw something shift in the air, something intangible, like a ripple in time. "This is where it all changes," Isla whispered. Jack stood beside her, taking in the weight of her words. Whatever was about to happen, whatever this place was, he knew that it would be the start of something new, for both of them. The air around them seemed to hum as Isla's hand rested on the glowing crystal. Jack watched, his breath caught in his chest, as the glow from the structure deepened, casting ethereal light across the rocky plateau. It was as if the entire world had slowed, waiting for something to happen. Jack took a tentative step forward, drawn to the crystal, though he couldn't explain why. The closer he got, the more he felt the weight of the moment pressing in on him. This was something important, something that went beyond understanding. It was a place of healing, as Isla had said, but Jack wasn't sure what that truly meant. Was it for her? Or was it for both of them? He didn't know, but he had a feeling that whatever they were about to experience would change everything. Isla's voice broke the stillness. "It will help you too," she said softly, her words almost a whisper against the wind. Jack looked at her, the sincerity in her eyes making his heart ache. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Isla's smile was gentle, but there was a deep sadness behind it, a layer of vulnerability that Jack hadn't seen before. "The path to healing is not just for the body," she said, her hand still resting on the crystal surface. "It's for the soul, for the heart. We carry burdens, Jack. Burdens we don't always see, but they are there." Jack stood still, letting her words sink in. He knew, on some level, what she meant. He had carried his own burdens for years, things he had never spoken of, things he had buried deep. But hearing it from her, seeing the weight in her eyes, made him realize how much he had been carrying without even knowing it. He had thought the hardest part was surviving, getting through each day, staying alive. But now, standing beside Isla, he realized that the true challenge was healing, letting go of the pain that weighed them both down. Isla turned to him, her gaze never leaving his. "I've carried my past with me for so long," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've tried to outrun it, tried to hide from it, but it's always there, waiting for me." Jack felt a tightness in his chest as he heard the raw honesty in her words. He wanted to reach out, to comfort her, but he didn't know how. He had never been good at comforting people, at least, not in the way they needed. But with Isla, it felt different. He didn't need to say anything. She just needed him to be there. Jack stepped closer, his hand gently brushing against hers. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a bridge between them. Isla didn't pull away. Instead, she squeezed his hand lightly, her fingers warm against his. "You're not alone," Jack said quietly. "Not anymore." For a moment, there was no sound except the gentle hum of the crystal and the soft rustling of the wind. It was as if the world had paused, just for them. Jack could feel something shift inside him, a weight lifting from his chest. It wasn't all gone, the burdens he carried. But for the first time, he didn't feel like he was carrying them alone. Isla closed her eyes for a moment, her expression softening as she took in a slow, steady breath. When she opened her eyes again, they seemed clearer, less burdened. "Thank you," she whispered. Jack smiled, though it felt small. He didn't need her thanks. Just being there for her, sharing this moment, was enough. "Let's rest here tonight," Isla said, her voice firm but gentle. "Tomorrow, we'll continue our journey." Jack nodded, knowing that their journey together had only just begun. Whatever they faced in the days ahead, they would face it side by side. And for the first time in a long while, Jack felt the warmth of something that had been missing from his life for too long: hope. The night was falling, but Jack wasn't afraid. Not with Isla beside him. The stars above them began to twinkle in the darkening sky, their light soft and steady. And in that moment, Jack knew that, no matter what the future held, they would find their way. Together. The following morning, the light was soft and pale as the sun crested the distant mountains. Jack and Isla stood at the edge of the plateau, the early light catching the faint glow of the crystal structure behind them. There was a calmness in the air, a peaceful stillness that seemed to follow them wherever they went now. Isla stood still, her eyes closed for a moment as she took in the surrounding world. She had always been observant, but now there was something different in the way she looked at everything. Something deeper, as if she was finally seeing it all clearly. "Are you ready?" Jack asked, his voice steady. He had grown used to the quiet between them. But now, with the new day unfolding in front of them, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of anticipation. Isla opened her eyes, her gaze meeting his. There was a softness in her expression, a quiet kind of peace that Jack had never seen before. "I am," she replied, her voice filled with quiet strength. Jack didn't know what had changed in her, but he could feel it. She had always been strong, always so composed, but now there was a lightness to her, as if the weight of everything she had carried had finally been lifted. As they continued their journey, the landscape shifted again. The rocky terrain gave way to a thick forest of tall, strange trees, their leaves shimmering in the soft light. The air was cooler here, and the ground beneath their feet was soft, covered in a thick layer of moss. Jack had no idea where they were heading, but it didn't matter anymore. With Isla beside him, he felt as though he could face anything. They moved through the forest in silence, the only sound being the rustling of the leaves and the occasional call of distant creatures. Jack kept his eyes on the path ahead, but every now and then, his gaze would wander to Isla. She walked beside him, her movements graceful, almost like she was one with the forest itself. She had always been a mystery to him, but now, more than ever, he wanted to understand her, to know what had brought her to this point, what had shaped her into the person she was now. "Isla," Jack said after a while, breaking the silence between them. "What is it that you want now? What are you searching for?" Isla didn't answer right away. She seemed to be considering his question carefully, her eyes distant as she gazed ahead. After a moment, she spoke, her voice softer than usual. "I'm not sure anymore," she said. "I thought I was looking for peace, for a place where I could be free from everything. But now, I think what I'm really searching for is something simpler." Jack raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "What is it?" he asked. Isla turned to him, her eyes meeting his with a clarity he hadn't seen before. "I'm searching for the ability to live without fear," she said quietly. Jack's heart skipped a beat at her words. He had always admired her strength, her resolve, but now he understood the depth of it. She had carried so much, had fought against so much, and yet she was still standing, still moving forward. "You've already found that, Isla," Jack said, his voice sincere. "You found it in yourself." She smiled at him, the faintest curve of her lips, but there was something in her eyes that made Jack feel like she had finally found peace within herself. It wasn't about the places they went or the things they did. It was about the journey they had taken together. The healing that had started long ago, long before they even met, had come full circle. They walked on, side by side, with no destination in mind but the path ahead. Jack no longer worried about where it would lead them. As long as they were together, that was all that mattered. The world around them seemed to fade into the background as they moved forward, the soft rustling of the leaves and the gentle breeze guiding them. And in that moment, Jack knew that, whatever the future held, they were ready for it. Together.